Hi and welcome to today's episode in which I satisfy another viewer request and have a go at making tamales. A viewer left a comment on one of my videos asking if I'd ever made tamales, and if I hadn't, would I consider. I can't remember what video it was. I'll stick a note on screen because I need to get going. I was then chatting to one of my patrons who lives in Mexico, and I said, is there anything you'd like me to have a go at doing? And he said, oh, tamales would be good. So I thought, well, that's 2 requests now, I can't ignore that any longer. So I bought some fresh corn husks off Amazon. The patron also sent me a link to a website, Mexican Made Meatless. I'll link to it in the description. And I found a recipe for vegan tamales. This recipe is for tamales rojos, which is red tamales, because we're going to be using a chili paste sauce kind of thing that makes them red. I kind of looked at the ingredients, and that's going to make a massive amount of filling, I think. So I've halved it. The recipe I'm making uses masa harina. I sat and did a load of reading up this morning, but for the sake of full disclosure, I'm running on about 50% capacity mentally and physically. So fully expect, well, this is going to be beyond chaos and into pandemonium, I think, but hopefully it'll be entertaining. Traditionally, tamales are filled with a masa filling. Masa is, I think, corn that's been, I want to say, nixtamalized, which means it's been soaked and cooked in an alkaline solution. I think they often use lime, and it's the flour they use. If you've had a corn tortilla chip, that very distinctive flavor, that's from this process. If you've seen the soft taco video that I did, and also the pupusa video I did a while back, I use this flour in both of those. So I'll link to them in the description. I'm going to make a very basic filling with the masa. Then we make another filling to go on top of the masa. The other filling that they have uses oyster mushrooms. My finances are in a bit of a mess at the moment. I'm having to really cut costs. I've just had over £1,000 go out in vet bills for Shadow. So I've sat last night and thought, what can I use that's in the house already, rather than going out and buying fresh ingredients. I'm going to be using the soy vegan steaks that I've used in a few videos, and I've soaked those already and shredded them down, so I'll go through that in a minute. I've already soaked the corn husks, that's what these are. So it's the outside of an ear of corn. Once you wet it, it becomes more easy to manipulate. I filled the sink up with hot water, put the husks in, and then just pin them down with a heavy dish. And just left them in there, I think about an hour in total. Don't think they need to be in there more than 30 minutes really. So put them in first, and then by the time you've done everything else, they should be ready to go. The next step on the recipe is to make a red chili salsa. I'm not going to use their salsa recipe because it needs loads of dried chilies, like different Mexican dried chilies that I don't have, and I haven't got the cash to buy. I'm just going to make up my own. I don't really think you're going to be able to see the label so well, but this is ancho chili paste and a few other bits and pieces. 1.25 cups of this paste, which if my estimates are right is 300 mils. I'm also going to cheat by using tomato puree, tomato paste. So I'll do maybe a tablespoon. I'll do a ½ teaspoon of garlic powder, teaspoon of onion powder, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I can always increase the salt levels later. So I'm going to stir this together to try and make sure the tomato is well combined. I'm going to do a 1/4 teaspoon or so of cayenne pepper, just for a different type of heat. I'll be using some of this to go in the masa filling and the rest of it to go in with the shredded soy pieces. Nearly forgot the cumin, didn't I? So that's ½ teaspoon of ground cumin. I toasted seeds and then just put them in the pestle and mortar. Next step is making the filling, because that needs to cool down a little bit. So I'm just going to heat up a tablespoon of sunflower oil in my pan. In my bowl here, I've got the soy pieces. So these were steaks, and they come as dried pieces, and you put them in liquid and they rehydrate. The original recipe uses 2 pounds of mushrooms, which is just under 1 kilo. My thought process was I need to end up with 1 pound, ½ kilo of pieces, and the dried pieces will probably swell by, they'll probably double and weigh twice as more. I had the soy steaks and also some chunks as well that really need using. I mixed up some beef flavour stock with Marmite, Old Bay seasoning, tomato puree. Mixed that together, put the pieces in, and then kind of put something heavy on top and left them to soak. And then as I was shredding them, I suddenly realised when you cook mushrooms, they release a ton of water, don't they? So I actually needed much less. I'm only going to be putting that amount in. It's the same ones I used in the slow cooker cacciatore. I'll link to that in the description. They're a really good thing to keep in the cupboard because they don't need fridge space. You just add whatever liquid and flavour you want in there, and they're hydrated in, again, about ½ an hour, something like that. I've got a small to medium size red onion. Do a fairly thin slice. And then I'm just going to cook these until soft, and then I'll put some garlic in. The recipe says to do the garlic and onion at the same time. I'm not a fan of doing that because I always burn the garlic. So that's probably a teaspoon or so of minced garlic. If you're not as much of a fan of garlic as I am, feel free to reduce that. Once the garlic's fried off for a minute or two and it doesn't smell quite as pungent, I'll then put in the rest of the ingredients. I'm going to add another half teaspoon of cumin. Fry that off for a few seconds on its own, just with the garlic and onions. This is 675 grams or so of the soy pieces. I'm going to use some light soy sauce, do about a teaspoon. So I fried the onions and garlic at 6, dropped it to 5, put the pieces in, and now I've turned it down to 3. I'm going to add the sauce in. I cocked up, didn't I? I shouldn't have added all the sauce. I thought things were going a bit too smoothly. A bit worried that that's just going to evaporate and become really dry. Yeah, I'm going to keep it covered just in case. I'll now make the masa filling itself. The one for the tamales rojos uses vegetable shortening. Don't have it. It said you could use things like vegetable oil or even vegan butter. I'm going to use sunflower oil in mine. These ones aren't going to be, I don't think, as fluffy, because part of the process with the shortening is you beat it down so it's really fluffy and light, and then you start adding the other ingredients, so it becomes very kind of lovely and fluffy, whereas doing it with the oil in this way isn't going to give quite that same texture. I'm going to use the cake mixer to do the masa filling. Looking at the ingredients, and I'm suddenly worried that halving the amount is going to not be enough. I think I'm going to double it back again, so it's the original quantities. And if there's any left over, I can either put it in the freezer for the next time I make tamales. And because I had that snafu with putting all of the chili paste in, yeah, I've completely messed up. I somehow need to get this back up to 240 mils and we're at 50. I'm going to use some sriracha hot sauce, glob that in. 2 to 3 tablespoons, probably 3 tablespoons of tomato paste. Look what I've just done. Mix this together and then add a little splash of water, and that should get me just about there. A bit more onion and garlic powder. I'm going to start with a cup of oil. That's 190 grams. Weigh out a pound of the masa, 453 grams to be precise. Put in half of the masa into the cup of oil. I'm going to add a teaspoon of baking powder. This is going to give it some light fluffiness. The original recipe calls for 1.5 teaspoons of salt. That's a lot of salt. I'm going to do half a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to beat that until it's well combined. Okay, then I'm going to mix in the salsa. Mix that until it's well beaten, and I'll probably stop it a couple of times, scrape the sides again. Okay, so now I'm going to keep adding the remainder of the masa and start adding the stock. Large spoonful of the masa. And I'll do a little stock, mixy mix. The recipe states use a very large bowl. I've used the largest I've got. And it's still not large enough because it's going everywhere. Maybe I should switch to a cooking pot. All right, see how that does. Okay, I think that might almost be there. I've got 300 mils of liquid left, so I've used just under 3 cups. The recipe says mix until you have a creamy, smooth and airy corn dough. I'm just going to have a look on the website. Yeah, it looks quite similar. I think just a little bit more liquid and it'll be good to go. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. I'm going to clean down because the kitchen is a mess. I'm just going to turn everything off for a minute because I'm getting really stressed. Probably have to plug a couple of batteries in, and then once I've cleaned down and set everything up ready for tamaleing, we'll crack on tamale. Clean down, calm down, so now it's time to do some assembling. There's a little video on the website, but it's tiny on my phone, and she's also sped it up. I'm going to do mine in the Instant Pot on the pressure cooker setting, so I've set that up, but we won't need that for a while. I'll assemble a couple on camera, switch everything off, do all of them, and then we'll pick it back up from the point where they start going in the Instant Pot. I've grabbed some clean tea towels that I'll use to dry the husks. So I'm just looking to make sure it's intact with no huge splits everywhere. So I'm just going to pat off as much of the excess liquid that hasn't drained off as I can. These are fragile though, so do be careful. Grabbed a little bowl that I can put the filled ones in. I need to put 2 tablespoons of the mixture in. Spread it on. Then grab about a tablespoon of the filling mixture. And then I think like that, from what I can gather from the video. You want to feel the husk, and whichever side is smoother needs to be the inside. It feels, at least, as if that's the way it was on the piece of corn, and you'll kind of feel that it wants to curl inwards. You want it on the inside. And this one's got a split here. I'm hoping that's not going to make massive problems. Okay. Oh, and if it hasn't been clear, you want the wider end at the top and the narrow end gets folded up. This one's a bit smaller, so I'll do maybe a little bit less mixture. Especially because we put that baking powder in, they are going to swell up a little bit. And if you've really packed loads in there, it might be too much. Suddenly wondering if I should maybe do them a bit less folded. It's just really difficult to see. On that video, she does it so quickly. Because as it heats and the baking powder kicks in, they're going to swell. So if you've packed loads in, it's going to and go everywhere. I'm going to keep going until I've run out of either the husks or the filling, whichever happens first. As long as I need to remember to keep some of the husks back. We'll come back, I'll show you how to set up the Instant Pot, and then we'll take it from there. Tamales have all been wrapped up. Surprisingly, it was the husks I ran out of before the filling. I managed to piece quite a few of them together, of the ones I thought were just going to be kind of scraps. I didn't count, so I'll just have to see how many I can get in the Instant Pot. Because you can't double stack them, they have to be in one layer. So hopefully there's going to be enough space to do all of them. So I'm going to use a steamer basket. I've got some water in the bottom. You don't need much. We don't want it to come above the level of this. So I'll put that on. That's the bowl of wrapped tamales. They need to not be too tightly packed in there. I don't know if this is necessary, but I'm going to trim any that are really sticking up. I assume that you do this step to stop the water dripping inside the tamales. But it's fiddly. So carefully put the lid on. Pressure level, we're going to go low for 35 minutes. That's the amount of masa filling that I've got left. So it is a good job I did more, probably enough for another 6 to 8 tamales. And then I've got probably another 2 tamales worth of filling left. I was being really reserved with the filling quantity. And then by the time I got towards the end, that was the point that I had to start putting 2 together. So they ended up a bit smaller. So I could have definitely put a little bit more in each, but I wouldn't have got them in the Instant Pot, so that's fine. The pressure cooking time itself is going to be 35 minutes. Pressure cookers, Instant Pots at least, take a good 8+ minutes to come up to pressure, and that's when they start properly cooking. Then I need to let it vent naturally rather than using the pressure release button. So that'll be 15-20 minutes or so. So in total, you're looking around an hour or so in the pot. The method in the original recipe is steaming them on the stove. And then as I was looking down through different bits and pieces, I saw she had pressure cooker instructions. I thought, oh, I'll do that because it's less faffing around. I'm linking to the original in the description, so have a look there for in-depth cooking instructions. So if you're going to use a pot, for example, like that, and a steamer basket, so you do that, cover it with aluminium foil and make a hole in the center of the foil, then put the lid on and steam for 60 to 90 minutes until cooked through. Once that's finished its natural vent, I'll start the cameras up again and we'll do some eating, hopefully. The Instant Pot has finally finished its natural vent. It's much later than I wanted it to be. I thought this was going to be done about an hour ago. However, the Instant Pot wasn't sealing. So after 5 minutes after switching it on, there was steam coming out from the outside of the lid. Stopped everything, vented it, looked, all the water had burned off. So I filled it back up, changed the ring, the sealing ring on the Instant Pot, started it back up again, same thing happened. So switched everything off, vented it again, and looked at the rim, and there was a tiny bit of rice that must have been caked underneath somewhere that had gotten dislodged. So I wiped that away, started everything back up again, and this time it worked. Of all the things I thought would go wrong today, that was not one of them. I've also got a horrible feeling that the bottom of the tamales are going to be really wet because I was having to kind of use a wooden spoon to pull the tamales and the rack away from the side of the pot, and then just pour the kettle in. But because I was using boiling water and my hand was over something hot, I burned all the side of my already injured hand. So I was just like, just chuck it in and it'll be whatever it is. So let's get in there, see what we've got. I've got Fingers crossed, toes crossed, everything crossed that can be crossed. Promising. At least it's not just one big exploded mass of stuff. So I'm going to take one out. I'll have a quick look. Yeah, it's coming away cleanly. All right. I can't get too close because the lens keeps steaming up, but nothing looks to have swollen up too much, which could be a sign that the baking powder was not the freshest. So here we go. If I bring it up to this camera, that's a bit better. You can see what it's like. It's holding its shape, it's not mush. Let's have a go. That's lush. It's got that classic kind of masa flavour from the flour. Very rich, umami kind of flavours. That's really tasty. I think with a bit of salsa verde, something just to brighten the flavour up a tiny bit. I thought about it, but I didn't have any of the ingredients really. And I'm glad I didn't because I'm completely running out of steam. Yeah, just a little fresh, zingy, light salsa of some sort would go really nicely with that. Or even just some plain vegan yogurt. I don't know if I've ever had tamales myself before. Unfortunately, South and Central American food isn't so widely available in the north of England, or at least in Leeds. I don't know if the texture is right or not. It's yum. So if it's wrong, oh my goodness, I don't know what a right one, how much better it could be. Flavors are very tasty. And because I was a bit concerned with the amount of hot things I put in there that it was going to be mind-blowingly hot. But it's not at all. To say it's got ancho chili in and then cayenne and then sriracha, not too bad at all. Just a nice warmth rather than blow your head off. If you're not a fan of chilies though, like if you don't like that heat, you could try and find a chili, like a really mild chili sauce. Or, I mean, it won't be authentic or traditional, but just use maybe like a tomato base for it kind of thing. I'm sure that would work equally well. It's been a while since I bought that bag of masa, so I'm not sure how much I paid for it. Probably couple quid, £3 maybe, and I've got 3 recipes out of it already, and there's still at least a third of a bag left. If you buy some really fine cornmeal, or if you can find polenta more easily, buy polenta and stick it in the blender so it becomes more powdery. You want that smooth consistency, I think. It's just not going to have that tortilla kind of flavour, you know, like a tortilla chip, because it's the special process that they use, the alkaline process, that gives it that flavour. But if you like the idea of the dish, like the corn kind of thing with your filling, certainly worth trying with other bits and pieces. Grits maybe. In terms of the filling part, not the masa part, but the bit with the chili paste in it. Well, they both did, that's not clear. The meat bit, you could do all kinds of different things in there. On the website, they've got a recipe for bean and cheese tamales. Could possibly do the soft taco filling that I did. Maybe hold the moisture back a little bit so it's not quite as wet, just so it doesn't ooze too much. But I think the flavours and the texture would be really good. You could use just a basic tofu as well. Ooh, smoked tofu would be, that would be great in there. To do it, either do very small dices, probably small dices or large crumbles. The frijoles borrachos that I made, drunken beans, those with some of the extra mature vegan cheddar, that would be banging. It's probably going to be a great way of using up leftovers, like if you've got small amounts of stew, wet chili type things. Make up a batch of the masa filling and then just wrap it up. I think she says foil or maybe baking paper even, if you can get it, maybe a double layer of baking paper and twist it up or something like that. That might be worth doing. If you didn't want to go to the hassle of having to wrap everything for whatever reason, I imagine you could probably try and put the masa mixture into like a baking paper roll or even a foil roll and like steam it into a log and then slice it and serve the filling over the top of it. I need to say a great big thank you to the amazing Jimmy who gave the initial idea in the comments for doing tamales, and also big thank you to my Patreon who suggested it and reminded me that I'd thought about doing it. If you'd like to join up and get some access to behind the scenes content, chat features, all that kind of thing, I'll leave the link down to my Patreon down below in the description for you. There's various tiers, so whatever feels affordable for you. Just helps me buy in ingredients and explore different things and put some content out there for you. If there's something you'd like me to try for you or try and veganize for you, always feel free to leave suggestions down in the comments. I'll consider most things. If you want lots more plant-based cooking inspiration, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tap the bell icon, you'll get an alert as soon as I publish a new one. While you're waiting for next week's, have a look at this.